Welcome everyone today to the video series on how to conduct performance evaluations. The Sheriff's Department has recently implemented a new performance evaluation segment for your certification process that has to do with merit raise increase and just general performance evaluation. The performance evaluation packet is going to look like this. It is very explanatory in and of itself. Great instructions are included on the face and on each individual line of the performance evaluation, as well as how to total the scores up and things like that on the back. If you have any other questions after this video on how to actually conduct, how to fill out the form itself, your officers, your command staff can guide you on that. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. So on today's video, we'll be discussing some of the key points that you need to consider when you're conducting an actual performance evaluation, both as you're doing the evaluation and when you're actually meeting with the employee to go over that evaluation. The first thing that everyone needs to be cognizant of is that a performance evaluation is a very, very powerful tool. People don't see that as such, but you have the power to either build an employee up, to mold them into the employee that you know or wish that they can be, or you have the power to tear that employee down, destroy morale, make them into an employee that will not work in your organization. The choice is yours depending on how you actually conduct this performance review and each subsequent performance review. All right, so the first thing to be aware of when you're doing these evaluations is that nothing that you discuss in the actual evaluation should be a surprise to the employee. You should be just bringing up issues of concern or good points that the employee is doing along during the evaluation period, whichever review period that you're choosing. Most of the time, it's 1 year. So, when the employee does something bad, correct that employee, address it at that point in time. Don't let it sit around and go, well, I'll just wait till 11 months from now and I'll bring it up during the evaluation. That's not the way to address it. The hard part for a lot of people when they're doing an evaluation is that they want to expand the scope of that evaluation. Please remember that only items that have occurred during the evaluation period should be brought up on that evaluation. And I'll give you an example. Your evaluation period ended on the 30th of June, but you're sitting down on the 20th of July with that employee, and the day before you sit down with that employee, they do something really bad. And you go and change their evaluation, or you let that bad thing influence the score on that evaluation. Don't do that, can't do that, because it happened outside of that period. Now, you can discuss it with that employee during that evaluation, but make it clear to them that did not have any influence on that current evaluation. It may have bearing on the next one, but not the one that you're working on then. Likewise, if something good happened outside of the evaluation period, give them prompts and kudos on the good thing that happened, but it should not affect the evaluation that you're working on. There are two types of feedback that I like to say you give during an evaluation. You give feedback for improvement. In other words, somebody did something that was less than stellar, and you give them feedback to help them improve their performance so that they score higher on the next evaluation. The other type of feedback, and this is one that you should give on every single evaluation. You may not give feedback for improvement. They may be doing just an adequate job, not anything special, not anything bad, but everybody should receive some sort of positive feedback. I'm a firm believer that everybody has a superpower, okay? You may not see it as much in everybody. You may have to look really hard to find that superpower in some people, but everybody has one. One person's superpower may be paperwork. They're really, really, really good at doing reports and filing their paperwork. on time, accurately. The other person's superpower may be the way they deal with individuals in the public. They have that power to empathize and put themselves in that other person's shoes and really get to the bottom of a problem and help that person out. Any of these things can add to their value as an employee, and you need to make sure you bring that out in these performance evaluations. That's part of building that individual up and not tearing them down, okay? You want to be very generous with compliments and very sparing with negative aspects or feedback for improvement. One of the hardest things as an evaluator for performance evaluations, because normally most people evaluate multiple individuals, is not to compare one person to another person. That's not the point of a performance evaluation. You're comparing that individual to the job that they do, to the expectations of that particular job, not to the superstar employee who is knocking everything out of the park. Everything they touch turns to gold. You can't compare everybody to that employee. You compare them strictly to the job. You have expectations for each individual job. You have a job description. You have policies, procedures, rules, regulations, and as long as they're following within the parameters and guidelines that you set for them, they're doing an adequate job. They may not be stellar, but they're doing an adequate job. So compare each individual to the job and not other employees in the department or on your shift. Another thing, and this seems to be, people think that the simplest item on any evaluation, and this is on every single evaluation, attendance and punctuality. People think that is the simplest one, but it's not, because people tend to make that subjective, okay? You need to, and your department they will set some standard for attendance. Whether it be, we don't want a person to call out unexpectedly more than 3 times in a 12-month period, or once in a quarter, or whatever that standard ends up being. The sheriff's department is working on that. They will let you know what it is. But the reason why you want to have some sort of standard is you don't want to compare the number of absences to how many days somebody misses, okay? If you set a standard and say, well, you can't be out more than 3 times, or you can't miss more than 3 days. I'm sorry, I said that a little wrong. Let's say you set your standard and it says you can't miss more than 3 days in a quarter. And Jack misses 3 separate times, but he misses 1 day apiece. So he's met that standard. But he's called in unexpectedly those 3 times. But Jane has been out on 1 occurrence, but for 12 days because she had a serious illness. Which one is worse? That is the standard you have to set. I suggest looking at occurrences rather than total number of days, okay? In my career, I find that it's easier to plan if I know up front somebody's going to be out of work. But when somebody calls in at the last minute, and that puts undue hardship on everybody on the shift, on the supervisor, you're trying to find coverage, you're trying to work shorthanded, whatever the case may be. But if you know up front, you have options of whether to get somebody to cover that shift or drop something that you had intended to do that shift. Anyway, make arrangements and adjustments in your particular schedule that day to overcome that absence. And this is a little hard for people. I'm evaluating Jim, and I really like Jim. Jim is a great individual, but Jim has a couple of problems that we need to address. But, I think that this evaluation may be tied to some sort of merit increase or raise. So I'm just really not going to say anything about Jim's deficiencies. You can't do that. You have to be honest. You have to be honest whether it's good, and you have to be honest whether it's bad. Because if you don't tell the employee the full story, then they think they're doing a good job, and you're reinforcing bad behavior. And anytime you're not honest, good or bad, eventually it's going to come back to bite you. You know, you give Jim that evaluation and you say Jim's a superstar, you know, he's awesome, and then all of a sudden Jim's performance takes a nosedive, and 6 months later you're going to HR going, we need to get rid of Jim because Jim's not a performer. And I pull the evaluation back out and I say, but Jim's got stellar evaluations. What's going on? You don't have any record, any history to indicate that Jim needs to be disciplined, particularly being discharged. So you have to be honest. Sometimes it hurts to be honest, and sometimes it feels really good to be honest, but either way, be honest. I'm going to jump back a minute and we're going to talk about feedback for improvement, okay? That is where you're using the evaluation as a coaching tool to help an employee understand what their shortcomings or deficiencies are. But in the same light, you don't just point them out. You set expectations and help that employee understand the goals and even help them work through what needs to be done to achieve those goals. Because just simply telling somebody your performance stinks, that's not good enough. You need to tell them why it stinks, how do we keep it from stinking less, and how's the pathway, what do we need to do, and where is my expectation at what is the level of that you reach when it doesn't stink anymore. You know, what is the bar, what is the goal for your performance to be on par as expected by the sheriff's office. So use that tool to help mold and guide that employee so that on the next evaluation, now they're receiving exceeds expectations and does not meet expectations on whichever particular criteria you're having that issue with. So it's a great tool. Use that tool. And last but not least, and I'm going to tell you this is something that a lot of people fail to do, but it's one of the handiest, dandiest things that you can do in an evaluation. Pull the last evaluation. If you have mentioned feedback for improvement on a prior evaluation, you want to address it in this evaluation. Hey, I'm really proud of you for taking the steps that we agreed to on the last evaluation and correcting this problem. Or you were a superstar at paperwork on the last evaluation, and now you're not doing your paperwork so good anymore. What's going on? What can we do to help improve that to get you back to exceeding those expectations or to get you back on the level where you were before? You're not comparing one employee to another. You're comparing that employee to themselves, and that's a very valuable tool. A lot of the employees, you will give them a copy of the evaluation at the end. Most folks won't keep it. And that's our job. We keep that evaluation, and when you go through the next review, do your evaluation on the current period, but pull that other one out and look and see what was supposed to be addressed or what still needs to be addressed from that last evaluation. If there was an ongoing issue with that employee, you came to a consensus, you developed a plan, we talked about how to fix it, and then the employee did absolutely nothing with that information. Now we got a much bigger problem than hey, I'm getting dinged one time on this current evaluation. So use that tool, and all these things put together can help create a better department, one in which your employees are working better together and as individuals, and all trying to reach the same goals for the betterment of the Sheriff's Department. So thank you all. If you have any questions, I am always available, and hopefully your command staff can help guide you through this process as well. Thank you.